Hello and welcome to Avoiding Common Pitfalls in Implementing Internal Developer Portals, or IDPs. Today's webinar is sponsored by Harness and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Scott Becker. I'm from Actual Tech, and I'm excited to be your moderator for this special event. Now, before we get to today's great content, we have a few housekeeping items that are going to help you get the most out of this session. First off, we want this to be an informative event for you, so we encourage any questions in the questions box in your webinar control panel. Not only will we have team members responding to questions during the live event, but we'll also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the presentation where we'll discuss in greater detail some of the top questions that you ask. That Q&A panel is also the place to let us know about any technical issues that you might be experiencing. A browser refresh is going to fix most audio, video, or slide advancement issues, but if that doesn't work, just let us know there in the Q&A and we'll provide further technical assistance. Now, second, in the handout section of your webinar control panel, you'll find that we're offering several resources. I'd especially like to call your attention to the main resource today from Harness. It's the slide deck, so you can pull down all the information that you're getting today. So I encourage you to access those resources now and feel free to share them with your friends and colleagues. Now, third, at the end of this webinar event, we will be awarding a $250 Amazon gift card to one lucky registrant. Of course, you must be in attendance during the live event to qualify for the prize. Official terms and conditions of today's prize drawing can be found in the handout section. Just scroll to the bottom and you'll find the link with the details there. Now, finally, one of the best benefits of an event like this is the opportunity to ask a question of our expert presenters. So to help encourage your questions, we have a special additional prize for you. That's another Amazon gift card, this one for $50 for the best question. After the event's over, we'll look at all the questions that came in, pick out the very best one, and contact that prize winner. All right, with that housekeeping out of the way, let's get to today's fantastic session. I'm delighted to introduce you to our presenter today. We have Tim Davis, a senior developer advocate at Harness. Tim, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me, Scott. Really excited to go through all of this information here today. We have quite a bit to get through, but hopefully it's super informative for everyone.
Great. Well, I'm looking forward to it. Take it away.
Excellent. So yeah, I am Tim Davis. I am a senior developer advocate at Harness. If you have never heard of us at Harness before, we do a lot of things. Started out with a fantastic CD product. We've got CI as well, plus a multitude of different modules inside the platform, all to help your DevOps experience. One of our newer ones that I have the privilege of talking to you today is IDP, or our Internal Developer Portal. And we're going to kind of go through some of the, pitfalls that come through when you're implementing an IDP. There's a lot of things that you need to think of overall, and we're going to go through, some of them here. But always, you want to make sure that you're doing your research, that you're making sure that you've got all of the information possible, before you start deploying things and testing things and all of that. Just be an architect to make sure that you've got all of those requirements and constraints and stuff like that written down and, notated. But let's jump in and see if I can help you figure out exactly, what you need to be thinking about when you're looking in the direction of an IDP. So today we're going to talk about what it is. We're going to talk about why it's useful. We're going to go through 3 of the major pitfalls of implementation, which, in the grand scheme of things, it's 3 out of a bunch, but we'll go through 3 of the major ones here. And then we'll talk about how to mitigate some of these, which I think is very important, because just telling you, hey, this is going to be broken, or hey, you need to, look into this specific piece of the process doesn't really do you any good if I can't help try to lead you out of that, out of that forest a little bit there. So what is an IDP? This is a centralized tool that allows developers to interact with all of their services and everything you need to build, deploy, and manage software. So when you're going through, it'll aggregate your resources, make it easier for everybody to kind of take a look. IDPs are self-service, so they are generally going to revolve around the specific developer that logs in. There's service catalogs, automated workflows, standardized governance, improved onboarding, metrics, and analytics. All of these things are kind of involved with the IDP, and all of this stuff that's in there is kind of one of the reasons why having this presentation is important because there's so many things that you need to kind of think about first before you get started. Service catalogs, when it comes to IDPs, these are fantastic because if you've got a large scale organization with a large amount of developers who are working on a large amount of projects all at once, it can be difficult for each developer to know, hey, what is assigned to me? What are my services? What are my team's services? What are my organization's services? Which services do I have available to me that somebody's already working on that I might be able to utilize in my projects? Automation workflows and easier onboarding. So if you've got a developer that is coming in brand new or they need to stand up a new service, you've got the tools in place that at a few clicks of a button, they can go ahead and scaffold out an entire new service so that it has all of the files and all of the configuration and things that they need. If you take that a step further and you utilize something like a cloud development environment, which Harness also has, then you can go through and immediately have a pre-configured development environment with all of the tools, libraries, and configurations necessary so that they can start coding on day one. With all this said, an IDP can be a bunch of different things to a bunch of different people. It kind of depends on what your organization or what your team's needs are. And we're going to kind of talk through some of that here. So the first pitfall is actually one of the largest, and that is insufficient scale for impact. And now, what does that mean? When it comes down to utilizing an IDP, there are probably some sales representatives and stuff like that with any kind of tool that will tell you, yeah, our product will work for you. Great. You have 2 developers. Yeah, you can use this. You have 2,000 developers. Yeah, you can utilize this. When it comes down to an IDP, a lot of the major players will tell you you don't need this tool if you don't have a certain number of developers. Now, Backstage, which was originally created by Spotify, they say 150 to 200 developer minimum is how much you need in order to really find the value of an IDP. Now, why is this? Really, it's because you need to be able to come through and have the pains that these solve. If you don't have a scale of developers, you probably don't really have the problems that you're going to need this for. So you don't have visibility issues across multiple teams, multiple stacks. So really, you want to make sure that before you even get started, that you have the ability to justify that amount of money that you're going to put into it, or the amount of time or effort or engineers that you're going to put into it. Now, really, why this matters is, multiple reasons here. Different teams use different tools, environments, processes, and a lot of that can cause inconsistencies and inefficiencies. I don't know about you, but I have definitely worked in shops before where different teams utilize different tools and different methodologies. And when those teams need to work together, a lot of times that can cause problems. So not having that visibility into how another team does something or what tools you may need to work with them, that can be difficult. Information on internal tools, services, environments can also be scattered across various systems. That's a huge visibility problem. If you don't know what is in the organization, where it is, who it belongs to, that can definitely be a problem for you. You need to make sure that you know who's accountable for certain things, what tools you have available. And all of that kind of comes with scale, because with smaller teams, it's a lot easier to kind of manage that, to make sure that you can understand exactly, what's happening in your environment. Real-time visibility is key. You need to be able to see that information. So another pitfall we hear is boiling the ocean. I'm sure we've all heard about this a million times, but it's definitely a big problem. In a lot of environments, you kind of have these systems and these tools that you're trying to implement that do a whole bunch of different things. And as you saw when we talked about what an IDP was, there's a ton of different pieces of that, such as the automation for workflows, the service catalogs, and things like that. Now, if you come through and you try to implement all of these tools at once, that may cause a problem. That may be really, really difficult for you. So coming through and starting small is going to be a key to being successful with that. So instead of going through and completely overhauling and putting in this tool, which an IDP is going to be a tool that's going to not only change where people go to look for information, it's going to be a people and process thing as well. So making sure that you kind of start small and you have that people, process, and tooling changes coming through in stages, it's going to be a lot easier for everybody to come through and see what they're doing. So you got to kind of try to find a use case that works for you first. Maybe visibility is your biggest issue. You can come through and see what services available so that everybody can kind of see. If you want to standardize a service onboarding, so if you've got multiple teams that are going through and creating new services and developing and deploying, and you want those to be kind of standardized on, hey, what libraries are we using? What versions do we want to use? What tools are we using for that? Doing this as a first step can help you. If you want to use automation as a first step, then you can come through and just set it up to where they have workflows where they click a button and all of a sudden it sets up the base new service that they're looking for so that it saves everybody time. If you want to set up scorecards, say you've got a application that uses a specific Python library. Well, all of a sudden that Python library has a vulnerability and you need to upgrade it. With service scorecards, you can actually go through and connect to all of your projects, and it will show you exactly how far through the process of upgrading those libraries that you are. So if, say, 50% of your packages have been upgraded to the correct version across all of your services, then you can see that in the scorecard. And you can come through and have a quick heads up view of how far are we in our projects? Do we have things that are problems? Where do we need to kind of focus our effort? A lot of this stuff and figuring out which use case that you want to start on, that happens before you even start to implement the IDP. This is going to be coming through from actually, talking to your developers, going through, putting out surveys and figuring out, hey, what is your biggest problem day to day? What would you do to repair people and process inside of our organization? Nobody's going to know more about how to fix your organization than the people who are actually having those pain points day to day, and that's going to be your developer. If you're doing a IDP correctly, that's going to be run generally by the platform engineers or the DevOps engineers or whatever you happen to call them, and your end user is going to be your internal developers. So making sure that you're delivering the services, you're delivering the fixes, and doing what your internal developers need to do and what their problems are and how to solve them, that's how you can go through and make sure that you're going to be successful. That's how you can kind of not necessarily boil the ocean and make sure that you're implementing the right features at the right time in the right way so that everybody's successful. Because if you try to implement absolutely everything at once, you're going to have problems. You're going to, run into some growth pains. People aren't going to know where to find things. But if you start one little piece at a time, let's go through and fix this problem. Great. Now that that's working, let's fix this next problem, then this next problem. That's really going to help you be more successful over time in implementing your IDP. The next one we have is the cool factor trap. And really, I think that this is one of the biggest things. And in all fairness, I have been guilty of this in the past. And that is just wanting to use a tool because it's cool and because it's new. And the biggest illustration that I have of this that's been stuck in my head for quite some time is like service mesh with Kubernetes. I have seen so many people say, hey, I need this. I need to use service mesh because it's new and blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, you have one cluster running two services and, you don't have a lot of traffic. You probably don't need a service mesh, but it's cool and you want to utilize that. I totally get how that is. Back when I was an engineer, I can't count the amount of tools that I pitched upstream simply because I wanted to play with it. Like, even if it was just in a lab, like I wanted to play with it. IDPs can be a pretty huge thing. It can be a big undertaking if you're just kind of jumping into it head first. So going for the cool factor trap, it may not necessarily be for you. You may not necessarily find that return on investment that you're actually looking for the amount of time and engineering and everything that it takes to come through and deploy this. Especially if you haven't gone through and actually done your, surveys and things like that to make sure that you're not going to boil the ocean and to make sure that you're actually going through and finding all of your use cases, finding the problems that you need to solve and everything like that. So with this, you always want to measure first. we talked about running those surveys and kind of figuring out, hey, what are my pain points? How do we want to do this? You've got to talk to your developers. You've got to talk to your end users, the one that are actually going to be utilizing this. Because of the fact that an IDP specifically like solves a problem, you definitely want to make sure that you are solving the right problems in the right orders. So we've kind of come back, and just like the last one, how I talked about how communication is key, that's still going to be it here. You want to make sure that you are solving the right problems, that you're solving them in the right order, and that you have all the information necessary. Do you know what teams are working? Do you know what tools that they're going to be connecting with? Those are all the things that you need to know so that when you come through and deploy that, hey, we do need an IDP because we have enough developers. We have these kind of problems. You know, hey, which IDP do I want to use? Do I want to build versus buy, which is always an important question. Obviously, I want to tell you to buy and use Harness, but you never know. You find the IDP that works for you, that fits that. And just because you're not falling for the cool trap doesn't mean that it's not cool. You can always utilize a tool that's right for you and still enjoy it. It can still be cool. It can still be new. It can still be shiny. We're all in tech. We love to play with toys. So definitely coming through and making sure that you have asked all the right questions, that you have come through and figured out what your issues were. That's really how you're going to be successful with this. So really, what did we learn? IDPs can definitely be transformative for your organizations, but it can be difficult. Understanding and addressing common challenges and what's going on is going to be the key for you being successful. It is a product. You want to make sure that you have a product mindset. If you are deploying an IDP, it's exactly the same as the products that you're going to be deploying out to your customers, but your internal customers for the IDP, they're your developers. It's just an internal product versus an external product, but it absolutely is. So you definitely want to make sure that you have that product mindset and that you are successful. Thank you very much.
All right. Yeah, lots to think about there. I love this discussion. Wide open for questions here, but I've got a lot. The first one you answered immediately. I was wondering, how big does a company need to be
Yep.
for an IDP to make sense? You answered that
exactly right.
The backstage example.
Yep.
What do companies that are slightly smaller than that tend to use? Like, is there a progression? Like they're using some other tool or, something?
Yeah, and really it depends. I mean, in the DevOps space, everybody kind of finds a little tool for one specific issue. And a lot of times you can find, scripts or things that are inside of your, CI or CD process that can kind of like do checks and make sure that everybody's kind of standardized. But really, there's a lot of different tools that do all of this. The IDP just kind of brings everything together for a more centralized place. It feels like we're going back in time because there used to be these, one-stop shop platforms. Then people didn't like that, so everything got broken up into individual tools. Yeah. Now a lot of things are kind of coming back together because at the end of the day, it's a lot easier to go to one centralized spot to find out, hey, how are my migrations going via scorecard? Hey, how is my team doing in terms of their deployments? I need to set up a new service. Instead of having to go to multiple different tools to do this, bring all of those together. Now, of course, that's really where that scale comes in. Also, it's not just the amount of developers that you're trying to service. The larger the scale of the platform, that's also more engineers that you're going to need dedicated to the IDP in order to manage it. Now, if you build your own IDP, it's going to take a lot more engineering time and resources than if you're utilizing a platform that does it for you, such as Harness IDP. I would love to tell you that Harness IDP runs itself completely, but we all know that that's never true. So it'll definitely take some engineering resources, which if you're at a smaller company with way less developers, you may not have anybody that has that spare cycle in order to be able to help manage the platform itself. So that's definitely another reason why scale comes in and why it's important. So, you've got all these tools, they're all coming together and you need somebody to run it. You got to make sure that you've got all of the amount of developers that you need to have those problems to solve, and then the people to kind of run the platform on the back end.
Right. Right. Okay. All right. Great. Question from Ben here. How do you push adoption in your teams? Really interesting question.
Yeah. And, that's, that's one of the hardest questions, because the answer is always, it depends. Pushing adoption for stuff like that all comes down to friction. Whenever you have a tool or a process or something like that you're trying to implement into your organization, if it doesn't solve the problem, if it doesn't make the end user's life easier, they're not going to do it. A lot of people will definitely try to stick with, what we've always done, simply because they know the process. But if you can give them a tool and you can give them a process or something that makes their life easier, they're going to go for it. So the biggest way to kind of push adoption is to definitely do your homework. All the things that we talked about today with these pitfalls are going to make it so that you fully understand your organization, so that you understand your use cases, so that you design and deploy your IDP properly, and so that you kind of break it up into more manageable chunks. If you've got an IDP out there and you've got all of these different services set up inside of it, and you just want people to like wholesale stop what they're doing and start using this, it's not going to work. So that last pitfall, or the one we talked about, not boiling the ocean, sorry, the second one, that's going to help you with that friction, because you're just giving them a little piece of it. You're saying, hey, I can solve this little problem for you today if you just use this tool. Cool. Well, as soon as they're in the tool and they're using it, hey, I've got this other thing that you can use, and it's right here, one button away from where you were. So it all comes down to making sure that your design, your deployment, and your implementation and rollout are going smoothly.
Okay. All right. Excellent. There's kind of a question here from Alex saying, could we see a demo? That's it's short notice. I don't know, is there a place that people can go, to see a demo, or,
There absolutely is. I wish I had that prepared, which I really don't. But if you check out Harness, at Harness.io on YouTube, we've got several videos out there showing a demo of our IDP. If you go to harness.io, inside of there, we have our IDP, our internal development portal, developer portal. We've got that section inside of the website that has all of our documentation that you can look through. We've got lots of content out there about, how you solve problems with IDP, where the value comes from. There's a lot of information out there that you can find, either at Harness.io on YouTube or at harness.io.
Okay. All right. Question here from Brian, who's wondering, how crucial is the ability to quickly discover services, tools, and documentation, and how does Harness help you manage those needs?
That is a fantastic question. And I want to make an assumption here that you're talking about an automated way of kind of bringing those services in. It's definitely critical, because you don't want to go through and have to manually add a bunch of things, which can be very time consuming. You definitely want to make sure that you're ingesting all of the tools, all of the services, and everything. So, a good way of making sure that this step goes quickly is to do, just a quick inventory check before. Hey, let's see all of the GitHub accounts that we utilize for our systems. Let's see all of those organizations, hopefully that they're managed under as few as possible. And then when you go through and actually start connecting those into the IDP, it's going to start ingesting and making sure that you're getting everything. But really, the biggest thing that I can tell you to make sure that this is done well, because it is definitely a critical step, is to try to do the best you can to, have that, in mind of, hey, what do I have? What is roughly, what does that look like? Otherwise, if you ingest all of your stuff and you connect things and stuff's missing, you might necessarily know. So you got to try to take stock first to see what you've got and where it is. It definitely is a critical step. When you go through and connect your GitHub organizations into Harness's IDP, it's going to go ahead and start ingesting that. It's going to start building your service catalog and everything like that. So we try to make the process as automated and as easy as possible. But definitely you need to make sure that you know what's out there first, just in case something gets missed.
Okay. All right. One of the things that I was wondering was, is there a security element to an IDP? Like if you're trying to implement some sec DevOps, or just generally trying to shift left, in security,
Exactly right.
can the IDP help you with that?
Yeah, and so that's something where I would immediately look at a scorecard. So scorecards will actually go through, and based on what you tell it to look for, it's going to start checking and then scoring off these things. And for me, if I'm looking at a scorecard for security, I want to make sure that we've got enforcement on our package versions and things like that. I want to make sure that our supply chain is up to date so that we don't have any bad versions with vulnerabilities and things like that. And really, scorecards can help with that. So if you've got a project to help you, like I mentioned, upgrading all those Python libraries because one of them is vulnerable, that scorecard can help you really drive that project, because it'll allow you to see, hey, we're at a 50%. We need more than that. You dig into that and you can say, hey, why are we only 50? Which services and which teams are going to need to get in here and fix this faster? So it can definitely help you kind of have a one-up view of, hey, what do I need to fix? How far am I? Am I in the green? Am I in the red? Where are we at with that?
Okay, excellent. A question here from Alex, who's wondering, what features does Harness's IDP, or does Harness IDP separate it from the rest? And what should I consider when I think about build versus buy? So I guess two questions. Let's take the first one first, I guess.
Yeah, no, and that's a really, really great question. And I will actually take the other way first. Build versus buy, it entirely comes down to how much money do you want to spend on engineering time to build your own and to manage your own. If you have all of the resources in the world, yeah, you could probably do that. It's going to take you a lot of engineers. If you say have 3,000 plus developers, it's going to take you anywhere from 5 to 15 full-time engineers in order to manage that instance. If you've got that, cool, that's great. If you've got under 200 developers, we don't necessarily recommend an IDP, but anywhere from one full-time through 15 full-time engineers is what it's going to take to manage an instance like that if you are self-managing or deploying and building versus buying. If you buy, it's going to be a lot less than that, due to the fact that, like with Harness, the platform is already deployed. A lot of it's already configured, except for the fact that you go in and you have to connect, you have to make sure that you've got the right plugins and everything set up for you. So it definitely is going to take time. It's just going to take less when it comes to that. Harness specifically, and how we kind of separate from the pack, for us versus Backstage, it just comes down to ease and management. We've built a layer on top of Backstage in order to come through and actually allow you to do it a lot easier. You don't have to deal with a lot of code in the back end. We're going to give you the ability to kind of, click around and make things a lot easier to deploy, to configure, and to manage. And overall, it's just going to be our connectivity to the overall platform. If you're utilizing other services within Harness, we're going to be able to go through and connect and pull that information in. We're going to be able to give you better metrics and better scoring on the stuff that's going in. Even if you're not utilizing anything else in the Harness platform, we're definitely going to make sure that we're making that overall experience easier for you than having to go through and deploy your own.
Okay. All right. Excellent. And when you're talking about, maybe getting started with an IDP, what's kind of the top ROI case for implementing one? Just in terms of, I guess, let me separate that question two ways. Like, is there a quick hit where organizations tend to quickly see ROI, and then, I assume there are deeper ROI advantages?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, this is another one of those it depends questions, because finding ROI from one organization to another could be a completely different use case. So you got to kind of figure out what is your biggest pain point. From, what I see a lot, visibility problems are a big deal, of knowing, hey, what services do we have? What team owns that? What services is my team working on? What are the statuses of those services? Are they in good standing? Do we have our packages up to date? How do our deployments look? Are we failing a lot of stuff? Just having that overall visibility into what's happening is definitely a good way of finding some quick value. Another way of finding quick value is automation for workflows. So let's take the use case of standing up a new service. If you've got a developer that is like, all right, cool, I'm going to build a new service, and they want to build it from scratch. All right, they have to go out and they have to find what libraries they're able to use, which ones are standard for the company. They need to create that repository. They need to make sure that there's any default stuff inside of that repository, like configuration-wise, that they may need. There's a lot of setup process that comes along with deploying a new service that if that was set up beforehand, say by the platform engineers inside of the IDP, all the developer would have to do is come through and click, hey, I want to build a new service. It's going to go through, it's going to ask them a few things like, what is it called? What does it use? And it's going to build that service out for them. It's going to give them a repository. It's going to have the files that they need. It's going to be ready to go. If they want to take that a step further and utilize cloud development environments inside of the Harness platform as well, then they can click one button. It's automatically going to load up an SSH connection into a remote development environment into their VS Code. It's going to clone that repository down, and they're off to the races right then and there with a couple of clicks. So that's also, it all depends on what the organization is having the most problems with. But for me, visibility and automation are two key use cases that can really help, to save time and to find value in the platform.
Very cool. Thanks. Hey, is the Harness IDP, is it a SaaS thing, or is it, deployed on premises? SaaS?
Yeah. So the Harness IDP is a SaaS platform run off of the Harness platform.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Well, I think we've had you in the hot seat here for a while. We had a lot of great questions from the audience. I threw all the ones that I had as well. Just as we wrap up here, just any tips for people as far as, getting started or kicking the tires or that kind of thing?
With a product that's this big, and really with a lot of products, I love kicking the tires. I love playing with stuff. But for me, the biggest thing with something is go check out the documentation. We'll go through and we'll show you exactly what the key use cases are. We'll show you, some of the setup, some of the configuration. We've got some videos there that'll kind of run through what, a day in the life looks like and kind of, what our platform looks like overall. So I would definitely say do that. If you go to harness.io and you find the IDP section under products, you can actually sign up there and, we'll give you a demo and we'll let you go through and, test it out yourself if you find that the demo call is fruitful for you. So, definitely go through and check out the resources that we have available at harness.io. And, it'll be able to kind of show you, is this right for me? Does this platform look right for me? And if so, then, hey, let me talk to somebody and see some more.
Okay. All right. Well, Tim, this has been a really fascinating discussion. I appreciate this intro into the pitfalls in implementing an IDP. This has been great. Thanks for your time.
Hey, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
All right. Okay. And before we wrap up, we do have one more piece of business. And that's the Amazon gift card prize drawing. And I should say before that, be sure to grab the slides out of the handouts here in the last couple of moments of this webcast, if you want to grab those. And the winner of the $250 Amazon gift card is Simon Luo from Michigan. So congratulations to Simon. We'll be in touch to get you your card. And with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank Harness for making this event possible, and Tim for a great presentation. And thanks as always for attending and for your fantastic questions. That's going to conclude today's event. Have a fantastic rest of your day.